In this demonstration, I'm going to be adding flesh onto the skull. Here I have a skull that I've already modeled out to the proportions of a anatomically correct skull. I know that there are all different types of skulls out there, and no one skull is the same, but we are using a generic shape of a skull, and it is to the measurements of a standard head. So this is a full-fledged portrait size. And what we are going to be doing is a process of adding teardrop shape forms in order to create the muscle tone of the facial structure. I also have my supply of clay, which would be about 10 to 15 pounds of red terracotta clay. Of course, you can use any clay that you have on supply, but try to make it a clay that is a water-based ceramic clay. This process can really only be done with a water-based ceramic clay, not a oil-based plasticine clay, because we need the softness and the movement in order to model the shapes properly that we are going to be using. But if you don't have a red terracotta clay, any color clay would work. Terracotta clay is very fine clay. It's very soft, and you can achieve very fine detail. And I have about 10 to 15 pounds of clay already compressed and organized for me to grab onto. I also have my damp towel here. That damp towel is for us to clean our hands as we are doing the process of applying the shapes onto the facial structure. And it's also used to keep your clay draped in order for it not to dry completely, to stay a good softness. Also, be sure to have a spray bottle ready to go so we can douse down the clay form as we are working, and of course to make sure that our clay head as we are working does not dry out, to prevent any type of cracking or shrinking, because we must continuously keep that clay damp in order for us to do the process properly. So let us continue and begin. Here are the teardrop steps, which are the steps that we are going to take in adding the shapes to create the facial structure. We are going to be starting with the eyeballs first, so you can see 1, 1, and then we're going to be working continuously symmetrically with these teardrop shapes. So we will be sculpting small teardrop forms as accurately as we can, because that's going to help us sculpt and form the three-dimensionality of the muscle tone, which will give us a proper format for the foundation of the facial structure. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to do is to go ahead and grab a wire tool or a regular knife, and let's cut some grids into the clay so we can access it properly, so we don't grab just random amounts. So we have some sort of a system that we're already working on or working with. That will allow us to segment out the amount of clay that we have. So after you've seen the diagram and the 10 steps that we are going to take, we are going to then grab the small orbs that you have made in order to fill that eye socket. Now, it's okay if you need to widen up that skull eye socket as wide as you need to in order to get that eyeball in, but you definitely want an orb or an eyeball that will completely fill in that eye socket, just like so. You'd be surprised on how big your eyeball is inside your eye socket, but also we're going to be adding layers of more clay, as you saw in the diagram, that will then fill in some of that space around, and that eyeball will not look like that as we proceed on. But we also want an amount of clay to carve and define later on. So it's okay to make things a little bit thicker, so later on we can then carve into the clay to add more detail, whether that be the iris or the reflection illusions, all that stuff we can handle later on. But step one, add the eyeballs into the eye socket, and you can see as I rotate how they are sticking out just a bit above that nose bone. You don't want it too far out, but that's just the right amount, and we can always add more clay. And remember, all these processes that we're going to be using for these steps are reversible and easily repairable because we are working with clay, the most forgivable form of material. Now for step two, we are going to be doing the eyebrows. So let's go ahead and grab a little bit, about the same amount, a little bit more maybe, and we're going to be doing a teardrop shape now. We want to go ahead and make sure that we have enough clay. So if you can see, I've kind of grabbed just a few segments of that grid that I've chopped. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to create an orb first, as accurately as I can. Use the palm, the crevices of your hand, right in that nice shape right there, that kind of curve form from that palm. Concentrate on that area. And then after you got somewhat of an orb form, doesn't have to be perfect, okay, then I want you to create a tail. I want you to kind of make a triangle out of your palm and squeeze that tail so you make a nice teardrop shape form here. And as you can see how easy how easy that was, in a sense of just doing an orb and just stretching out that tail form to make a nice teardrop shape. If these are made accurately, meaning that if you have somewhat of a rounded form and somewhat of a tail and not textured up, you see how I didn't use any of my fingertips to create this. It was all in my palm of my hand. That's the way you want to create it. But if that's structured pretty nicely, you'll see how the format or the overall beginning process of the face will go a lot smoother, because we're already dealing with some surfacing by creating some nice teardrop shapes. So practice that for a bit, and then let's see if you can make a few nice ones so we can start applying. So let's make two of these the same size, and then we'll add to the brow bone. So I have my two teardrop shape forms that I've done my best to smooth out and to make sure that they're not too textured up, and of course that they are the same size, not completely accurate, but enough to do what we need to do next. Now, step two is brow bone. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place one right here, right on the top. And then, you don't want to overlap the eyeball too much, because we are going to be moving the teardrop shape. But before we do any type of sculpting, you see how I'm just using my thumb, or any type of movement, I'm just compressing that teardrop shape down. You see how I'm creating kind of just, an even flatter teardrop shape on that area. And that tail form should wrap around the side of that skull. Remember, we're trying to maintain that sense of three-dimensionality. So just working with my thumb as I add that first step. So just compressing that teardrop shape before you do anything. And you see how much surface area that covers, and you see how I'm even pressing down with my thumb, already kind of designing how that muscle on top of that eye, on the eyebrow bone, is looking. So just placing that and compressing that, getting that pretty flat, not too flat, okay, because we do want some movement or allow us to create some movement in a bit. Okay, but just like that, we are going to flatten out that teardrop, still maintaining that teardrop shape. After that, I want you to go ahead and get your towel, and I want you to moisten up the palm of your hand right in this area right here. Okay, so you're going to moisten up the palm of your hand so it's nice and wet and slick. Okay, and then I want you to use this muscle right here, right on that soft part of your palm, right on that thumb muscle, right? Lock that wrist, and I'm going to hold on to my head from this angle and just compress back. Again, grab that palm and compress back and up. Keep wetting your palm hand so it stays nice and slick. You don't want to rip and tear the clay. You want it to move back. See, I'm kind of placing that bone right there, that palm of my hand right on that forehead, and I'm lifting up. And that's allowing me to achieve that three-dimensionality, that curved form. And you see how I'm moving my skull as I'm working. I'm spinning. If you don't have a platform that spins, you are walking around it. Your head is moving from side to side continuously, analyzing the shadow and the way that it's dropping and draping over the clay. So that's the first side. Now let's do the next side. Same exact process. I'm going to overlap that first initial teardrop shape and do the same thing. Going to first, remember, compress that clay down with my thumb, shaping it as I go, but more compressing it in. Make sure you are working symmetrical, making sure that areas like this and this are somewhat even. Now I do know that everybody's going to have a different set of pressure. You have a different shape of a thumb. You have a different shape of a palm. So do not worry if it doesn't look exactly like mine. Just go with the flow as long as it feels good, and most importantly, as long as you're having fun doing it. So you see how I'm just compressing, just using that thumb just to shape it slowly, making sure I am looking at the shadows as I go. After I've flattened that out, do the same thing. I'm going to clean my hand, get my palm nice and wet. Same thing, use that part of the hand, and I'll go ahead and do a zoom in so you see how that possibly can look a little bit closer. And I'm going to go ahead and again use my palm of my hand and just lift back. Lift back. No fingertips, all in the palm of my hand. Up and then back, because remember, we have that forehead that we have to consider. You know, all humans have somewhat of a vertical lift and then back. So you see the palm of my hand can fit right in that forehead and then lift and then bend back. Make sure you don't start going horizontal here. You want to go horizontal up here, and we'll be adding more clay. Again, remember, this is just the initial placement of the clay. Back. Always get your hand wet so it slides that clay, and that's what's nice about terracotta clay. That red clay with all that iron in that clay allows that to move without a lot of texture and without a lot of grab. And there is your your second step. Since I've compressed that teardrop shape and moved it with my palm of my hand, I'm already building a forehead that is recognizable and, of course, more importantly, three-dimensional. On to step number 3. I'm going to be grabbing 2 more teardrop shapes. Again, try to sculpt those teardrop shapes so they are nice and smooth. And I'm going to apply that right on the cheekbone. So number 3 is the cheekbone. And you can see I'm doing the same process where I'm compressing down with my thumb. I want to go ahead and wrap the tail right on that cheekbone line there. And of course, you can see how I'm already kind of shaping the eyelid area. It's not the eyelid yet, but it is the flesh around the eyelid. Again, just compressing, just maintaining that teardrop shape. There we go. Okay, next step, I'm going to go ahead and you can always add a little water if you need to. Get your palm nice and damp and use the same area. You see where the clay trace is there? It's the part that I am using to just lay that even. See how I'm making sure I am not just focusing on here. I'm focusing on this side as well. Again, in the 3-dimension, in the round. So if you can't spin your platform, you're moving your body with that teardrop shape. Okay, same thing with the other side, working symmetrically. And the head is going to look, or the face is going to look a little gaunt, almost malnourished, just because, again, we are pretty much, you consider this the muscle tone without the layers of skin and the layers of flesh. But again, we are going to proceed with another part demonstration that will get into that part of the process. A little bit of water, okay, or just wet your palm. Same thing. Move that to the side. And again, be sure that you are working evenly or symmetrically, so there's some evenness. Again, we'll be doing layers of processes like this, but it's always good to keep attention to that from the get-go. Okay. So that is part 3. Step number 4 is going to be the temple area right here. So once again, teardrop shape. I'm going to lay that right on that side bone there. And then I'm going to kind of turn the tail to that direction, following kind of the shape of the side of the head or the skull. Again, just flattening that out, maintaining that shape, merging that into the other form. A little bit more smoothing out on that seam line there, and then go ahead. Use that palm, slide back. we go. Starts to fill in the side of that face, give it just a little bit more mass. You can see how that eyeball is starting to recede into the head. It's not sticking out so far anymore because we're building up some of that mass around. Same thing on this side. Flatten that out. And it's important to make sure that you do have a good plastic clay. Remember, we're using ceramic clay. It'd be very difficult to do this with oil-based plasticine. Even though plasticine has its advantages, I mean, you don't have to worry about it shrinking, you don't have to worry about it drying. But you can't get the same movement and freedom of form and immediate form as you can with just regular water-based clay. But obviously you have to keep it bagged and you have to keep it wet, so you have to treat it like it's alive, in a way. You have to really care for it. There we go. So there's number 4. You can see how that eye is filling in, and we're starting to get some mass and we're starting to get some characteristics. Let it flow naturally and begin to envision who this person could be, who this person could look like, and maybe some memories of some people you have known and have seen before start to pop into your subconscious and eventually forming out into the real world. For number 5, we're making a bit different of a shape. So it's more like a oval. So instead of a teardrop, because we need to apply some mass to the forehead so we can then have a better brow bone structure. And of course we can go ahead and provide more lift to the forehead and then to the top of the head. So to add some mass. So same thing, apply with your thumb. Spread that out into, at this point, a shape that you enjoy. This is going to be kind of a circle-ish oval form. But you can see how from that profile, how it gives us more of a forehead that then we can add some more height to the back of the head and the top of the head as well. So flatten it out with the thumb first, and then let's move that back a bit. Again, view it from the profile so you can see how if I add my palm right in that area, that imprint of that palm makes a good shape for that forehead. And then I'm going to lift and then move backwards. Lift, backwards. A little bit more here. And that is really the first, or one of the mistakes a lot of beginning sculptors make, is to observe the profile and every angle so you can see the structure of the face building three-dimensionally instead of just looking at it straightforward. Okay, that is number 5. We'll move on to the next step, number 6. Now for number 6 here, I want you to pay attention to this area here, and you can see how there's some mass missing. So from the diagram, you'll see number 6 is these 2 areas here, and that's because when you look at it from that angle, okay, you can see how there's an odd shape to where how the cheekbone meets the head, and it's because the forehead needs more mass on that side. So even though it seems like we are overlapping and layering clay over the steps on a diagram, we need to do that because from this angle, right, there's an odd shape there. Of course, because we're trying to maintain some sort of representation uh, uh, with the anatomy of a human head. And again, I do know that all heads are shaped differently, but just so we can kind of get to a way to build and use these steps, we can kind of define as this as in an improper shape for now. So I'm going to go ahead and add a layer right there, right on that side temple, right above it. And then again, move that tail backwards over that side. You see how I'm kind of merging up now, kind of making sure I'm adding clay to the top of the head. And you can see how there is that layer building over that skull form on the back. You can see how that's building a good, maybe half-inch thick layer, maybe a little less. Okay, I'm going to smooth that out, flatten that out with my thumb, just the same. Keep that shape. And then we'll spread back. Making sure I'm giving it a good look as and you can see how I'm even starting a little farther down onto my other steps, onto my cheekbone and my temple, and beginning to merge those forms together into one shape. All with the palm of your hand. Really haven't used my fingertips at all. That comes later on. That comes with some of the details of the eyes and of course the nose. Okay, so that side's done. Moving on to the next. Good. And remember, I'm this hand, my opposite hand, each opposite hand from the one I'm sculpting with, I'm supporting the head. Again, remember, this is why it's good to have a good, solid, strong armature, and there is that strong armature demo on the channel that you can see to find out how to build your own strong armature so you can work with this amount of clay and move it with this amount of force. And that armature will maintain its structure, and the head, more importantly, will not move and collapse. Okay, now I'm going to spread backwards, constantly looking at the head in the round, making sure that you move your body around the shadows or you spin that head as you are working. You can see how that little bit really adds some definition to the top of that head. with the palm of your hand. That's what's amazing about the hand of the human, or just a hand in general, is that all the shapes that it creates, all the angles, um, are perfectly designed to work with clay. So there we are with step 6, and we'll move to step 7. So for number 7 here, we have the bottom lower side of the face, or the cheeks. So we're going to go ahead and do a larger teardrop shape. It's a little bit shaped different, less of a tail, more mass at the end. I'm going to lay that right underneath that cheekbone teardrop and lift up. Just compress down. Follow that jaw line. And then be sure to pay attention to the cheekbone area. We do not want your cheek to be too big, but again, it's really up to you. Understand that this is your head, and whoever you are sculpting will be true to who you imagine it to be. See how just compressing down, enlarging that teardrop shape, gives you the form you need. I'm going to soften that just a bit and then move it backwards. Making sure that I'm paying attention to how I want to shape the side of that cheek as I'm observing that side line. So you're really kind of having to move the head in order to see that side line and how that line changes as you walk around or turn the head. Okay, happy with that side. Let's move on to the next. Doing a little work on that side. And it's okay to bounce back and forth. From one side to another, because I do advise to work symmetrical. Kind of disperse your energy from one side to the next. And you see how I'm starting to merge it with the layer on top here. So that's eventually you'll be doing that to the whole face. But more importantly, again, that we are constantly paying attention to the three-dimensionality of the head, that you are looking at from all angles. For instance, look at that side cheek, go down to that chin or that jawline. But if you look at it from this direction, the point of view from the camera, that's where you have to be. You have to move there and observe from that angle. One thing sculpture teaches you to do, the processes, is to observe in ways that a lot of people, just don't observe that way, because we have to look at form from all angles. Okay, on to constructing some sort of a mouth, and then lastly would be just a format and an initial shape of a nose. Step 8 is going to be the jaw. So I'm going to grab a medium-sized teardrop shape, and the reason why you want another step there, some more clay, is because we are going to be putting the chin on, and we're going to need some mass to support the mass of the chin that we're going to need. So that's why we do need something. But we're going to start with the teardrop shape, backwards, going the opposite direction as we have been doing. So I'm going to add that, and to kind of add some mass into this back of the area there, back of the jaw. Kind of work it underneath the back of the head, the bottom. Now that looks obviously pretty thick, but when I spread it backwards, it's going to soften that mass down. So move that back and up. Keep observing it from all angles so you can, and if you don't like what you see, you keep moving, keep pushing that back, and it will develop into what you feel is good. Okay, it's looking pretty good. There we go. And now I'm merging it into the top layers. And I'll do the same to the other side. And be sure to not have your teardrop shapes to be too big. It's always best to go a little smaller than larger, so because you can always do this step twice. You can do each one of these layers, overlap them. So always advise to go a little smaller than larger if you are starting. Okay, now I'm ready to spread this side. Go. Keep observing the shape of that chin as I'm working. And there we go. I'm enjoying that. Seems to be filling out. Later on, we are going to be widening the neck so that won't look so thin. So we'll be adding clay to that area. And that's step 8, and we'll move on to adding a chin, and then of course adding a mouth, and then final would be the format, or just a simple shape to represent a nose. So for step 9, we are going to make just a small kind of flat shape, round, and just add that to the center. And we're going to start moving away from our palm technique and start using our thumbs. And you know, the way I like to work is I like to, you know, grab a hold of the form with my hands and then use that as a way to symmetrically move the clay in the same direction, just on both sides. And you know, you feel the clay, you know, you feel it out, and as you are moving, you're deciding the shape of the chin. Strong chin, soft chin, a V chin, whatever comes to your imagination. And remember, it is clay, so you can change it at any time as long as you keep it wet. And that looks good to me. So number 10 is going to be the mouth. And remember that the mouth is not just the lips. The mouth is the full area where the chin and the, of course, jawline meet, and of course where the mouth is and the lips. So let's treat the mouth as this full area, and make sure that we work really symmetrical. I have these double forms here, these double-tailed teardrop shapes, and I'm going to apply that right there, just like so. And then you're simply going to just use both of your thumbs symmetrically and lower that double-tailed teardrop down. And you can see how the mouth contains the lip and the top upper lip, and then all the way down connecting to the jaw and side of the chin. Same thing at the bottom. Another double-tailed teardrop. And remember, all of this steps, all of these steps in the process are going to be further defined when we start adding tools and other techniques. More importantly, tools. You see how I'm using my thumb? The shape of my thumb works perfectly for that bottom area of the mouth meeting the chin. And move that clay, merge it into the jawline. Keep that hand clean and that thumb and that finger clean so it moves the clay nice and smoothly. But then again, however you feel you want to move the clay and define the features, it's up to you. So that completes the 10 steps, the 10 teardrop shapes. And as you can see, I am already developing an interesting identity of somebody, I guess is the best way to put it. Now, I'm going to add one more step to the demonstration, which would be adding a nose. And the reason why I haven't or didn't put it in the 10-step process is because the nose is such a, it really is the beginning of the true identity of this person or the person that you will be sculpting. And so I really would like you just to approach it any way that you would feel and what you envision in the shape and the size and whatever it may be, in any shape, just go for it. But I would like to show you how I would approach it, because really at this stage it's really early on, even though the shape will be a major aspect of the character's identification or who they are as a person. It just says a lot. It carries a lot of identity. I'll just show you a way that I would apply a quick shape that can get my imagination flowing to continue on with some detail. And that would be it for this part of the demonstration until the next time. So what I have down here is just a small amount. And all I'm going to do is really just tap it into kind of a geometric shape first. I don't have too much clay, but we're going to move that around, and I'm going to, again, just make a simple shape that I won't add too much detail to, but just to, again, allow me to kind of start brainstorming some ideas about who this person could be. And remember, it doesn't have to be necessarily a human. It could be any type of entity that you feel. But we are working with the human skull. And what I have here is just a simple kind of wedge form that I'm just shaping into kind of a simple nose form that I can later on change. And then I'm just going to place that shape, and you can see here how I just kind of worked out a simple shape. I'm just going to place that right there. Make sure that it is centered. Of course, you are going to decide the shape and all the specifics, because again, we're just working with a simple format of a nose. Take the top of that and kind of move that in, maybe already start some interesting forms. And you can see how that gives me a lot of room to work with, in a sense of creating in specific nose for a specific identity that I want. So it's an easy way to work if you just kind of throw down in some shapes on a board, use the gravity just to create some interesting geometry, and then that then can be altered just ever so slightly, like I'm doing with my thumbs, working symmetrically. And gives us a good beginning. And I think that it allows me, more importantly, to sit and look at it at this stage for a long time and have a cup of coffee and listen to your subconscious and helping you figure out who this person is and what's the next step in the creating of a portrait bust of somebody. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration. I hope that you're at peace with sculpting and making art. Um, there will be another video for the added detail and the back of the head and just further defining. But this should get you started in trying to create somebody through your imagination. And of course, you can always use references by all means. Anything that inspires you to make art and to sculpt is good to use. Thank you very much.